Hey everybody, this is your favorite Chicano in politics, Christopher Sanchez, and I want to welcome back all our audio listeners who tune into our monthly podcast in its audio version. Thank you for joining us in our video version. Today, joining me, I have several friends and guests: Yesenia Jimenez,
Hola, hola.
Eddie Carmona,
Yo, whoa, what's up?
and your Latina advocate, Carol Gonzalez.
Hi, y'all.
So before we get started, let's go ahead and have Yesenia and Eddie introduce themselves. So Yesenia, tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Yesenia Jimenez. I use she, her, AF pronouns. So, I got to make sure that we're being accurate there. I'm a senior policy associate with End Child Poverty in California. We're a grassroots organization that really tries to, with a focus of abolishing poverty across the state, especially as it impacts our children. A little personal connection to me and why I'm in this work. I grew up in poverty. I grew up in South Central Boyle Heights, Ramona Gardens. And growing up and seeing the amounts of injustice that were impacting our communities of color, especially Black and Brown communities, is really why I'm in this work. There is a future that we can achieve, that we can aspire and dream of and reach. And that's why I'm in this work.
Yeah, and Yesenia's been at it for a cool minute. I remember when she was an intern. That's when she
That's
really got
right.
into this work, when she was interning for then the Western Center on Law and Poverty.
And that's why I call him Tio Chris.
Wow.
Just to be
Not Primo
Not
Chris.
Primo.
That's
Not
messed
Primo
up.
Chris.
We were there at different times.
You're
so-
almost 40, bro. That's
more like 18 with the bullet. Anyways, Eddie, tell us about yourself and what do you do?
Yeah, so Eddie Carmona, Director of Organizing for Pico, California. Pico, California being the largest grassroots, multi-faith, multi-race organizing network in the state of Califas. So one of the things that we really focus on is really we kind of run the gamut on issues, but we do grassroots organizing, empowering local community to basically fight for their own liberation on all the different issues: immigration, access to healthcare, restorative justice, affordable housing. We kind of run the whole gamut. So, and part of me being the son of an immigrant farm worker, that's part of why I got into the work. And yeah, I've been all the way from DC. I lived in DC and worked there for 3 years, to organizing in the ground all over the state of California, to now being in Sacramento.
And, the beautiful thing, kind of the first topic we're going to touch on for Eddie is that, for all of us, the topic is, we want to absolutely acknowledge what's happening in California related to the significant, horrific images we're seeing on immigration enforcement, and that's terrorizing our communities. Eddie was actually in Los Angeles on June 6th on the ground at the garment factory when ICE was doing its first big version of a raid, I would say, because on June 6th, there were other places that were also being targeted and that there was enforcement. But I think the ambient factory was one that folks all just kind of really responded to the Los Angeles Rapid Response Network. Eddie, would love to hear some of the thoughts that kind of went in your mind as you were there on the ground and other things that you experienced that day.
Yeah, it was crazy because I was actually I was in a meeting. I was down in LA for work. I was actually meeting with a couple of our organizers with LA Voice. And as I was down there, we were literally in the meeting, like just west of downtown. Our phone started going off, and it was like, oh, like Rapid Response Network started responding. There's ICE activity in the garment district, in the fashion district. So I was like, oh shoot! Like then we got a message from Father Brendan, who is the pastor at Dolores Mission. And so I told the team, I was like, I'm gonna go down there and see what's going on, because at that point he was saying via his text messages how bad it was and that there was like a militarized presence and everything that we saw on TV. So I headed down there, and number one, it was like super hard to get to because there was traffic blocked off in multiple places. So I kind of had to park. And by the time I got there, they had just finished leaving the ambient factory, and people were there kind of just talking about what happened. And the vibe and the mood was definitely one of like people were fearful. It was talking to people. It was like people said like, we have never seen anything like this. Like this is some kind of new tactic. And then obviously, like right after that, we saw everything that happened. And the funny thing is, like after, well, not funny, but it was kind of terrifying. Actually, there was a press conference that was going to be held there at the courts already for what they were doing at the courthouses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I showed up early, and there was undercover federal agents all
Oh,
over
wow.
the place. And that's where it was like just kind of like, oh man, like, and I've my experience with, you know, being in places of conflict and things like that. That's when I was like, knew like this is gonna get really bad. So we just had some conversations with some security team members, other allies and organizers, just kind of had that conversation. So it was it had the feeling of like something different is about to happen, the way that they showed up with a militarized presence. And sure enough, everything that followed that, you know, obviously we saw what happened. So
Yeah, and continue to be a reminder for everybody, and especially for folks like us who have to continue to remind policymakers that since June 6th has not stopped.
right.
Yep.
In fact, it's been increasing in not
Yeah.
only Los Angeles, but now has gone to other parts of Northern California, recently here in Sacramento,
Mm-hmm.
but Ventura County, and I think
IE.
the Inland
Central
Empire,
Valley.
Central Valley.
Everywhere.
And we've seen where the state of California, whether it be the governor, our legislators, and the federal administration, are kind of continuing to have this dialogue between each other, and kind of what I would call flexing on each other on with their social media presence, saying like, look at this video that we put out, and we're not leaving California. And then there's other things like the legislature saying we have a list of bills. The Latino and API caucus sending out a letter to leadership saying there's a list of bills that we can enact and pass today, to protect immigrant communities. So I don't know if there's anything that with the communities that you're working with that you've heard, whether it be precautions that they're taking, or is there anyone that's very supportive of the bills that are moving forward, or are
Well,
kind of anxious?
I'll just first say, as they should, like the legislator, as it should, right? The amount of harm that we are witnessing, brutality that we are witnessing, not only in Los Angeles but across the state, really, requires urgency. It doesn't
Yeah.
just require a social media press statement. Even
Right.
it has been powerful to absolutely see members like Assemblyman Solache out in the community in his district protesting, and him actually being impacted by pepper spray, right? Not only seeing that type of solidarity, but also movement, action, to do something about it. Um, in terms of what, just in our connections, I feel like so many of us who are up here in Sacramento, especially,
Hmm.
we have communities that we call home.
Yeah.
For me, my home has always been Los Angeles, and most of my family is still down there. And, like many of us here, we have mixed status families, who are undocumented. And to have like somebody like my niece tell me I'm afraid, I'm afraid to go to school while they were still happening, while children were graduating from elementary school,
Hmm.
and ICE agents were showing up to their graduations. Parents couldn't show up to their children's elementary school graduations because they were so afraid of being taken by ICE. And unfortunately, we have cases where that did happen. And so the amount of atrocities that we are witnessing can't even fully put into words the amount of harm it's causing to our children, to our families, the stress, the trauma that they're experiencing today. And we need our leadership to be prioritizing that with urgency. And so with the legislature, and I think with Senator Gonzalez and Assemblyman Mike Fong, um, sending out these two letters to the governor, to Senator Pro Tem McGuire, to Assemblyman Speaker Rivas, it shows not only solidarity across the two caucuses, and I think even outside of the caucuses themselves, um, but a sense of urgency that we're not going to wait until January 1st, 2026, when we're
Hmm.
already 6 months into the school calendar year. But we're going to say, once we pass these bills become law. And that's where we really need our 2/3 of the legislative body to agree with us and say, I actually see the urgency of these bills because of the impact it has on my communities, on our children, on our families, etc. And so I really hope they do stand in solidarity with the people of California and ensure that these bills get signed ASAP.
Yeah, it's time to push the. I think the other piece is it's really time to push the envelope when it comes to like established norms in politics.
Hmm.
And I mean that's what this administration is doing. They're basically saying we're going to rewrite the playbook and
Right.
just do whatever we want, deploying the military. I mean, to even say that U.S. Marines were deployed to
Right.
L.A., not only the National Guard, but United States
Yeah.
Marines were deployed to Los Angeles. Like, that is unprecedented, right? Like, we've never seen stuff like that before, at least not in my lifetime. Um, and I think that both at the state legislature and in Congress, I think our elected officials, our representatives, need to kind of move in a bolder way to say we have to meet this sort of taking the gloves off by this administration the same way and push the envelope on what's possible. And that's the only way. I think continuing to kind of go about the established norms, or we can't do this because of X, Y, or Z. Like, this administration doesn't care about any of that. And
Yeah.
when we kind of make the decision, both as a community, but also with our elected officials, we have to respond in kind.
Yep.
So,
I agree. I feel like right now it doesn't really matter like what party you're on. I think we should all be more cautious about what it means to be in California or in this country. If this is something that's happening in our own communities, like what's going to happen to you next? Like if you're not part of our community, right? If they're taking citizens, they're taking people
Right.
regardless of their
right.
status, they're not asking questions. Like, doesn't matter. Right now it's brown folks, then what? Like what comes next? And I think just seeing how we're going through this authoritarian regime change almost, it's almost repeating a playbook that we've seen
Hmm.
before and in other countries. So it's not anything new. I just think that because there's so much going on, it's hard to stop these things because you don't know what to kind of plug in at, right?
Right.
And then just historically thinking about how in the 30s there was the decade of betrayals where they were picking up Mexicanos, Mexican people, and taking them back to Mexico regardless of your
Yeah.
status too. It was the same thing, and that was less than 100 years ago. And so how do we protect ourselves from repeating our history but also knowing we weren't the only ones,
Right.
right? Then we have the Japanese internment camps where similarly, because it benefited America, right? I think there should be this bigger fear, and I'm glad that our API caucus is in solidarity with the Latino caucus with the letter and that they're prioritizing these bills.
Right.
And since we're getting all historical, I think it's only right, as someone whose grandfather was a zoot suiter, that once I heard that the Marines were going to Los Angeles, like images of my grandfather as a young
Mhm.
man first popped in, because he did experience the zoot suit riots. The difference between that time and this time is that Marines were actually deployed to Los
That's right.
Angeles. That time, they weren't necessarily deployed, but the sailors from the Navy had full authority to go and
Right.
beat our folks, my grandfather included.
Damn.
And it wasn't necessarily that images I was thinking about, but I was like, he volunteered to join the army at 17 because it was either that or get arrested.
Mhm.
And so thinking about young folks who are in Los Angeles are like, how do I survive?
Right.
And what are the alternatives for them right now? And can they don't have, or they may be thinking they don't have protections in schools or at the work site and so forth. And so what are their alternatives right now? And that shouldn't be a reality. And so that's why this letter is so important. And I would say we don't often see a letter like this from certain caucuses or from certain members of the legislature telling leadership, like, hey, like, let's do this right away, changing the rules because this is an immediate need. So the president's is also significant in the sense that folks are trying to act like it's
Yep.
we're beyond press conferences and
Right.
statements, where we need to actually put in place policy.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you especially, Chris, with a lot of the work that you have been doing with our street vendors and our garment workers, I'm curious to hear, you know, what are some of the words that they have for urgency, especially as it relates to what the work you're doing here in Sacramento.
I think that, with the garment workers specifically, we have heard from untraditional allies
Hmm.
to say, come and educate these workers.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
And because it's not about profit, it's about, like, I just don't want anything to happen. And
Right.
sometimes there is that relationship, just real quick, garment factories aren't always the best, but we have had untraditional allies come to us and say, like, give us an education, or
Mm.
please let my folks know when there's another know your rights that you're doing. And then with street vendors, the unfortunate reality is that it's hit or miss. Some of them are not vending. Some of them
Mm.
are their children are taking up the reins and vending themselves, because being someone who works out in the open is a target, right? We've
Yeah.
seen the images of folks running up on car wash workers,
Yeah.
street vendors. One of the street vendors who was detained in Hollywood was someone who was active, had gone to Sacramento to advocate for themselves, and was detained. Right.
Wow.
So,
I'm
Oh.
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just in LA this past weekend and the end of last week, and I drove through the fashion district, and it's completely dead. There's like no, I mean, usually you go on like on Saturday and it's like pretty like busy and pretty bustling,
Yeah.
and I think just now like folks are starting to come back out, but
Yeah.
I've never seen it like Santee Alley and all that place. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
just like totally not active, and there was just it just seemed like you kind of underestimate and don't realize not just the economic part of it, but how much community happens in that place as well. Like where
Yeah.
people are eating together, families are enjoying time, shopping together, and you can tell like there's a void right now in
Yeah.
that area.
I was actually out there last Sunday too, and I spoke to the owner of one of the. I went bridal veil shopping.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Oh,
married. I'm getting married.
mucha, mucha.
Congratulations.
And I spoke to her, and I wanted to like hear a little bit more about her experience being out here
Yeah.
since everything that's going on. And she was like, yeah, like it's terrifying to be
Yeah.
working here, but I don't have an option.
Yep.
Like so many of us who have our open storefronts, like we don't have options but to continue to survive. And seeing also, I don't like, the amount of community and that is developing, right? I want to also honor the fact that people know how to protect each
That's
other,
right.
and community keeps community safe,
That's
and they
right.
will always do that. And to hear her response to what has been happening in terms of the solidarity that they're seeing across industries, across LA, really, of everyday people showing up and volunteering to be a part of the rapid response network. When there's like a question about, like, I don't know, I see an unmarked vehicle, can somebody go scope it out? People
Mm-hmm.
are actually taking the time within their day to go scope it out. And just to hear that directly from her as a storefront owner was really powerful to hear, and how that has helped her decide to come back and open up her store. And then, in terms of the Vigilantes Act, right? She was talking about that too, of like
Yeah.
seeing masked men, masked people,
Mm-hmm.
and not having anybody identify themselves, and just like questions about people and how they were taken, and nobody really knows who took them and
Right.
why they took them, right? So I know that you were gonna talk a little bit more about some of the list of bills that got included in the letter, but
Yeah, in the letter, the Vigilantes Act, along with Senator Perez's bill, or I'm sorry, because there's the
Wings.
masking one
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then the Vigilantes. So there's Senator Wiener's and Senator Perez's bills, and then there's a lot more. I think some that are a little bit more urgent are the education ones.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about that, but I
Yeah.
think I also wanted to just to talk about the one that Yesenia was talking about. Like my dad, he literally called me. He's like, like we should be concerned about all these people just walking around kidnapping people, and then how they're attacking women too.
yeah.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, Dad, we have a bill for you, you know.
Yeah.
And so it just
Heavy
felt
call.
good to say like we're working on something, like obviously it doesn't happen overnight, but I think just letting him know like, yeah, someone thought of that already and like it's being worked on. He was like, wow, like y'all acted quick. I was like, but the process takes a long time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that goes back to why I think we're all really excited to see this move, because although they don't all have urgency clauses, it gives us more time to inform our communities of like, hey, if this happens like by this day, whatever it means, at least they'll know.
Yeah.
And in regards to our schools, I think our students are really seeing the impact, whether it's because of their own parents, their neighbors, their friends, themselves. Like anything can happen to them. So really just applauding Assemblywoman Mitsuchi, Senator Gonzalez, um, Senator Perez for their advocacy on if ICE comes to their campus, they have to notify the parents and folks that there's ICE on campus.
Right.
Then there's a second part where it's if they are on campus, they have to have like a legal reason to be on campus, which also puts like another barrier or parameter on like why they're there.
And
Um,
again, that shows again the problem solving happening is not only necessary, but it in some ways I've been, some of y'all have been involved with some of this work, ensuring that they are doing their job and
Right.
actually passing some of or introducing some of these bills. So just kudos to y'all. To like Eddie, I know that you have been really working with some of these members to make sure that
Mhm.
they are acting with urgency. So
That's one of the things that happened in LA at one of the schools at the beginning.
oh yeah.
They showed up to a school, but the Rapid Response Network down there had done such a great job of training the school staff that all the senoras like at the front office were like, "No, you're not coming in here," and they ended up having to call. I think they called the LAPD to come and escort them off campus because they were on some BS that they were saying like, "We want to do a welfare check on these
Yeah.
students,"
Mm.
and it was like just obviously a complete lie. So they were like, "No, you can't." You can't have access to these folks at all. So
And just a shout out to LAUSD for
right,
standing 10
That
toes
part.
on that, because I
100%.
was just like, okay, that's how we do it.
Yeah,
That's how we protect our children and students. So
100%.
And you're probably thinking, folks out there probably think, well, who's on that campus that they're looking at? And it's going to be folks who are unaccompanied minors that have arrived,
Yeah,
who are trying to go through the asylum process, but the Trump administration is literally dismantling that system. Folks who are going through the special immigrant juvenile status through that process. And those are the folks who are probably on their own, might be with a sponsor and a loved one, and they're old enough for them to be targets because of the way that the federal administration is painting the narrative, right?
right.
Because who looks worse in social media? 17-year-old or the unaccompanied minor who's 6 years old, who is
Right.
also going to court in the same process with
Right.
them as well and expected to represent themselves. Fortunately, California had put some dollars to have attorneys represent those children of all ages.
Let's go.
But in other parts of the country, those children are not going to have representation, whether they be 4 years old or whether they be 17 years old.
I think they're just being racist. I don't think they're that strategic to be like, let me go get these kids versus those kids. They're like, where are the brown people?
True, but I think
Yeah.
You know?
if you there is a narrative that they're painting out there, right? We've seen
Yeah.
2 videos. I mean,
Oh,
MacArthur
yeah,
Park,
yeah.
I think it's more than a video, but that was the intent of MacArthur Park, right?
yeah, I mean, MacArthur Park, I can't even begin to start with the atrocity that we saw there, and the amount of fear that they try to invoke into our community. But again, community showed up, and they're sick and tired of seeing the amount of militarized operations across our city. Karen Bass, did come out and asked them to leave, and thankfully they did leave. But still, a lot of that came from the pressure of community asking for them to leave. But I do want to add one bit here, because Chris pointed out a video that I think it was CBP that put out on Twitter, where they used Kendrick Lamar's DNA to showcase what they did in MacArthur Park.
The song DNA.
The song
The song
DNA.
DNA, yeah,
The song
yeah.
DNA. And let's just be clear. Kendrick Lamar, who's born and raised LA for real, he is not for these types of actions.
Right.
And actually, we were talking about this earlier.
He better be suing.
That's what we said, because he said people be suing out here.
We need
Okay,
you to sue these
so
folks,
Kendrick, we
man.
need you suing the federal government
We're
for
gonna
need
using
to at
your
him.
song.
Using your song to before. It reminds me of Will.i.am too. He came out with a song,
yeah, I
right,
saw
this
that.
weekend or
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
couple weeks ago or something. That was a really
Yeah.
actually really good song. And for most folks who don't know, Will.i.am's like he grew up with Chicanos
Yeah.
and the homies.
I can't remember if he went to Roosevelt or Garfield. I think he might have gone to Garfield,
I
unfortunately.
don't remember.
But I think he might have gone to Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you know what I'm saying.
Which
Yeah.
one did you go to?
I didn't go to, but
That's right.
I come from a very long legacy of Rough Riders from the East Los Angeles.
Yeah, there you go.
I went to Lincoln, so I was
East
never
Los
was a part of the
Angeles.
beef, but I wanted to be.
There you go.
Always starting peddling fights.
Always. So
But
good.
I will say in their messaging marching, they're using fear and other tactics. What they didn't expect and what has clearly been a problem for them is the community response.
Yep.
Community is not about this flexing or
Nope.
this
Right.
narrative. It's about movement. And
That's
like
right.
the every official in the administration has said, well, they're organized some way somehow. We don't know how they know what we're doing and where we're at, but they're causing us problems to do
Mhm.
enforcement. Yeah, like we're not going to let you
Uh,
take our loved ones.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a history in our communities, right? All over the state. I mean, we dealt with this once before in the previous administration, and where when 2016, 2017, when he was elected, the first time. So there have been some established sort of like protocols on the community organizing front to say like, we're going to continue to defend our people. And I think I want to be super clear too about what this is about. Like, let's be clear about this whole charade and political theater that it is for them, the administration.
Mm.
It's all about giving billionaires and corporations
Yeah.
more money,
That
right?
part.
Like they're using a culture war, a la Stephen Miller and all these other cronies that are in the backdrop, as a way to continue to propel the billionaire class and the major corporations. You look at the stock of Geo Group and Core Civic, who are now looking to build these new detention centers. Their
Oh,
stock has gone through the roof, right?
yep.
That's what this is about. They don't really care. They don't give a shit about the what's happening to brown folks or other folks like that are being impacted. They care about lining the pockets of cronies, billionaires, and giving these huge tax cuts, which we'll think we're going to get into that in a little bit as well.
No,
So
I think that's a perfect segue into, the attacks aren't just literally on the ground, but they're also in policy
Yeah.
halls in
mhm.
Washington, D.C., at our nation's capital. As many folks know, the Trump and the Republicans in D.C. have passed the what's known as the Big Horrible Bill or Ugly
The
Bill,
Basura
the
Bill.
Basura
The
Bill. I
big
think
trash
that's,
lie,
yeah,
The
right.
lie.
the
Yeah,
lie, la
all the
mentira.
and
Yeah.
and that continues to go into like
Yeah.
what Eddie was saying about who's benefiting in that bill and who's not benefiting.
Yeah.
There are cuts and impacts across the board to education, to the environment, to social service programs, and I know some of you have actually done a deep dive in those, and would love to hear some perspective on what do we know about that bill and how is it going to impact Californians.
Eddie had some numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, off the like top of my head, I've been doing these presentations for our organizers in our network. So in California specifically, some of the details, but overall, we're going to see 1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid
That's
over
awful.
the next decade, over the next 10 years, right? And in California, that's going to amount to about $30 billion in cuts. So you can expect around 3.4, 3.5 million Californians are going to lose some form of health care. And what I want to focus on is those aren't just like you hear those numbers and it's like that's a lot of money, but what that equates to is like people dying
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm.
and people particularly in rural California who are dependent on that Medicaid and on those different sort of services that Medi-Cal provides, right? In the state we call it Medi-Cal. Um, and that literally will result in the death of low income folks of color across the state of California. I mean, we're talking about, I think more this is saying it too, $186 billion in cuts to SNAP.
Yep.
And I think that is like 5.5 million Californians who will lose some form of food assistance. And when you think about food assistance, you think about kids who get free lunch. You think about summer school programs. Some kids don't have food to eat during the summer months, right? And they actually still get free lunch. That's like, again, this all results in like lack of food assistance, kids not being able to go to school and learn, and all of those different things that you can amount. And when what for? Like, again, like $170 billion is going to go towards immigration enforcement.
Yeah.
So we're going to see this huge influx. They're trying to recruit. We're basically paying border patrol agents more than we're paying teachers now,
Yeah.
and incentivizing deportations and the rounding up of brown people, brown and black people too. So anyway, those are some of the numbers, but I think Carol, you could put some like faces to it, right? Because this is not.
Yeah.
I don't want us to get stuck on the numbers. These are huge amounts that result in resources, but it really results in like people losing their life and their well being being impacted in a serious way.
Yeah, I think about when you were talking about the health stuff, I think
Hmm.
about the small hospitals are going to have to close, the people in the areas that don't have access, the Planned Parenthoods who won't have resources, the
Right.
amount of people who depend on different care. And then on the education front, it's going to impact almost everyone in the education
Yeah.
space. Folks are going to be needing jobs. A lot of federal workers are I I don't know if they'll be laid off, maybe not right now, they might be furloughed,
Mm.
but how does California address all the cuts? There's grants that won't be
Right.
reinvested in. Schools are expecting these grants to grow their research, pay their staff, support their after school programs. There's so much on the line that I think people are thinking, well, that doesn't impact me. It impacts your kids.
Right.
It impacts your livelihood in one way or another. I know Yesenia, you'll talk about the safety net, so I won't go too deep into that. But I think if our country wants to be a viable force to be reckoned with in the future, if we're not investing in our education, like what do we have to show for it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really
100%.
just disheartening to see that. On the positive side, I appreciate that California is doing some food bucks, the investment in summer food assistance for our
Mm-hmm.
students, which is great to see, especially in times like these. But how I don't know how sustainable that is either, of California having to plug all these holes for what's happening at the federal level, where at some point who's going to be on the priority list for the state when everything is being pulled in all
Yeah.
directions. So it's just adds another level of fear, and you know, it's just scary because we don't know what's going to be prioritized in the future.
Yeah, and I just want to appreciate you starting off with like why
Yeah.
why they did it, right? To
Right.
give breaks to ultra wealthy billionaires, people like Jeff Bezos, people like Elon Musk,
Mm-hmm.
and just to see the amount of devastation, not only already happening, right, but that's going to happen in the coming weeks, months, years, because of these cuts, is just again atrocious that we decided to put all these resources to people who don't even blink an eye, for having $10,000 in their pocket, right? When
Yeah.
some of our people, that's like, in some cases, that's what they have for a year,
Mm-hmm.
which seems insane in a state like California. But that's the type of deep poverty that we are witnessing across our state. And just to put some additional numbers to the numbers
Yeah.
guy,
100%.
I'm trying to
100%.
compete over here. Is the amount of families who are going to be impacted, Latino families, immigrant families,
Yeah.
I should say, who are directly being attacked by these cuts, right? It's not just everybody or anybody that is being impacted, but to see the direct attack on immigrant communities,
Yep.
on people who were benefiting, like refugees, asylees, uh, VAWA, right? To get on VAWA, you had to be somebody who was abused, victimized in another country and came here to
VAWA is
seek
the Violence Against Women's Act, right?
Violence
Okay.
Against
Yeah,
Women's
that's right.
Act.
Yeah.
And to see them now be barred from something like
Right.
CalFresh,
Yeah.
SNAP, also known as SNAP at the federal level, it just tells you a lot about their priorities, right? Republicans, right, like to say, we are the party that cares about those who are being abused. Well, you're over here cutting the resources that are going to domestic violence resources, to the food assistance, housing assistance, medical, etc., that is going to actually support our families. Over 100,000 families we are expecting to now be cut off from CalFresh
Mm.
as a result of what happened in this big ugly bill. Um, Luckily, we are working on opportunities to, ensure that California uh, has assistance available through the CFAP program, for these people who are now being disqualified from the CalFresh program. But like Carol said, like, that means that a lot of the pressure is going to come down to California. And let me be honest, because we've been doing a lot of work on this, on talking about revenues here in the state of California, because I also don't want us to operate in a deficit space here, because we
Yeah.
are the fourth largest economy
That's
in the
right.
world.
The
We did
world.
in the
Preach.
world.
Preach. Yeah.
And we didn't get here on our own. We didn't get here because of these billionaires.
Right.
Let's talk about how our communities are the real reasons why we have the amount of not only labor, people power, but also economic power in the world. And so in light of what's happening at the federal level, I think we want to make it loud and clear that our state leadership, our governor, needs to stand with its people, with his people, with their people, and ensure that we are properly taxing corporations who are in our state, very wealthy people who are not only benefiting from what's happening at the federal level, but even our existing tax code. And so I know that there's going to be a lot of work happening in this space because, to be quite honest, if we're going to keep on operating as if business as usual, it's not going to work, and we're
Yeah.
going to see a lot of hungry people. We're going to see a lot of people dying in our hospitals or even in our streets.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on something that Yesenia pointed out too, is that a lot of folks, when they think about this basura of a bill, they think that it's about money only. But it's not just about money, it's about policy too. In this bill, there's policy that has nothing to do with cash, nothing to do with spending. They're not saving anyone's dollars. They're literally blocking people out of programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look
Yeah.
at some of the things that are being done in higher education, they are increasing taxes on endowments for that support universities. So like say if USC has its own endowment, or the community college has its own endowment, they're gonna go from a very very low interest rate or a very very low interest tax to like it's like 1 point something percent to upwards to 8%. And so they're literally going to be taking cash from folks for who are deserving of scholarships, whether it be merit based or whether it be through their story or whatever. If you are getting a full ride scholarship, which most of the time only covers tuition, sometimes will cover things like books and housing, sometimes not all the time, but you'll no longer be eligible for the Pell Grant.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
creating a further of who is eligible for accessing higher education. And then it's, when it comes to SNAP, it's about taking out, foster youth and
Yep.
veterans,
Yep.
Yeah.
right? Veterans,
People who serve this country. It's
Mhm.
crazy.
and then there's other policy that's in there that is just it's nothing about dollars. And so I think that's the harder piece for folks to get around. And I think the other one I do want to mention is, like, as California needs to respond, California, if you're a child at a school here, you're gonna get served breakfast and lunch no matter what, no questions asked. But for the rest of the nation, that's not
Right.
that's not true. And now they're cutting breakfast or lunch programs even further, and they're putting more stipulations on who is worthy of lunch, right? So while California, we're going to continue to take care of our own, and we hope that the administration, Newsom's administration and the legislature continue to do so. Um, Sorry, Texas. Sorry, Illinois, and other states
Yeah.
like that.
Well, it's that whole, like, this is what I talk about, like pushing the envelope, right? I've seen a couple different research institutions that say that California contributes $80 billion more to the federal government and our taxes and all that stuff, right? That actually subsidize the red states across the
Yeah.
South, Texas, places like that, who actually have a deficit in what they contribute. So, we probably heard some folks, like I think the governors use it as a talking point,
Yeah.
others, right? So my thing is like, okay, that's a fact, that's accurate. Let's push the envelope and actually start exploring what it means to recapture those funds.
Yeah.
If we're going to be cut the levels that they're cutting from the federal budget to California, to all our states, let's start taking care of folks in California. Now, I don't want to sound like other folks, other low-income communities in other states don't deserve this stuff, but when
Right.
you're attacking us specifically, you're deploying the military to Los Angeles, you're doing all these things, right? What does it look like for us to say, let's figure out a way to recapture that funds? Now, I'm not an expert on tax code and how all that goes down, but like, can we have that conversation, right?
I mean, I
Yeah.
think you're pretty close to it because immigration code is second to the tax code,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that pretty well. By the way, we're not attorneys,
Right.
But so I
100%.
think you got
Or
tax code.
licenciados.
You're almost close to tax code.
Yeah. So I think so that's what I mean. Like, we just gotta, like, this administration has basically said, and I even think about some of the fights we've been in for a long time, right? Like SB 1070, right? Which was Arizona racial profiling bill. You could pull people over based on the color of their skin.
Yeah.
And I think about what's happening now with immigration. They didn't even bother trying to pass a law. They just said we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
And they say up and down, we're not doing that. We're not racial profiling. It's like, yes, you are. You just didn't even bother to have the public conversation
Yeah.
or to go through a policy perspective. You just said, just do it. Just go after brown people, brown and black people. It doesn't matter if they're citizens or not. So like, that's the thing. Like the gloves are off with this administration. How do we take our gloves off too? And that 80 billion, that's a lot of money that could pay for some of these cuts that, are happening in our state.
We're
I,
getting
I think
robbed.
there was a governor that said, if you don't give us these resources, then I'm gonna withhold my taxes.
Oh, Whitmore said that really early, right?
I think it was Whitmore, and I
Mhm.
was just like, okay, Governor
Let's
Newsom,
talk about it.
let's talk about
Wait.
it. Fourth largest economy.
Wait, I'm not gonna lie. I definitely asked Joe Steffenshaw. I
I
did.
Yeah.
I asked Joey. I said, so what are the chances?
Yeah.
Like, I asked that really early on because I'm like, look, like, if we could do something as a state, why aren't we?
Right.
So I kind of love that Newsom did a little public thing on it. I'm like,
Yes.
no, but like, really, like, let's double down because we're getting robbed.
Yep.
We're being robbed as a state. We're
It's our
being
tax
robbed
dollars.
as people who are like hardworking, doing good in
Yeah.
this state, providing for our economy. And so, yeah, I just feel robbed. And I think everyone should feel that way right now with all the
Yeah,
money that's
that's our
being
money.
funneled
That's right.
into ICE
Yeah.
and, all these other investments that they want to make. Low key, why is it costing so much money to open these detention facilities too? Like,
It's a profiteering business.
it
Yeah.
is. They're
Alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah. It's all about money.
I feel like they're laundering money at this
Oh,
point because
100%.
like first of all, why are we even allowing this to happen? Why are we even allowing these to open in
Yeah.
California? The fact that they're opening one, what is it, California?
California City.
California City, like Kern, this is insane. Like we shouldn't be allowing this. And then a point that you also brought up a lot earlier
Mhm.
about the money that's being going into that versus what we're paying our teachers. During the pandemic, when our teachers were like the front lines, educating our kids, doing the work that no one else was willing to do, we're still not paying them a decent wage.
Right.
We're still not paying them a decent wage, and we're willing to pay other people to come keep us in concentration camps, basically.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And I don't know this off the top of my head, but I'll tell you this from my buddies who served in the military. I don't even think they're paying the Marines or the Army.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
what
Because
they're gonna
no.
be paying.
sleeping on the floor.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It's
Oh,
all
no.
that's the thing. Like the whole political theater about it. That's what's really disturbing to me because you're talking about people's lives being impacted, and then you're treating like the National Guard and the Marines are sleeping on the floor of the federal building, right? It's like there's just a level of like it's disgusting. That's the best way to put it, right? Disgusting how they're operating, just with no humanity, no decency, and the audacity to kind of line the pockets over here of their billionaire buddies and the corporations. Which again, like, just to remind folks, this is what this is all about when it's all said and done. It's a transfer of wealth, driving us, all these fiscal conservatives, right? We're adding about $4 trillion to the national debt instead of like there being like, like, oh no, we're spending out of control. It's all a talking point for them, It's like they don't really care about spending because how much did we spend on all this stuff?
and while you can hear the urgency in our voices that California needs to do something, I think one thing I do want to remind everybody listening and watching is that the legislature puts its own deadlines in place. And so when it comes to
That's
the
right.
Latino and API caucus letter, when it comes to trying to fight back the cuts and impacts from the Basura Bill, the legislature could move as quickly or as slowly as they want to. Those are imposed deadlines. The only deadline that the legislature has that's in I believe the Constitution is related to the budget. Budget needs to be passed by a certain time.
Right.
But we've talked about that in other episodes. But so the legislature could move quickly on these things, and that's a reminder because like Nevada, I think takes like 3 months to finish everything, and they don't come back for 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Arizona's a part-time legislature. Texas
Texas.
is a
New
part-time
Mexico
legislature.
Mexico's like that.
So the for the legislative offices, because as we all know, Newsom's always listening and watching. That they could move as quickly as they want to.
Yeah.
But before we dive into all that, we're gonna take a brief pause. So stay tuned for the next segment as we move into some more things that are happening in California state capitol and politics.
Hey.